Before we proceed with the story, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to our YouTube channel. In the comments section, I invite you to share your viewing location. My name is Maya, and I am 36 years old. Today, I feel compelled to share a profound experience I had with my nephew Liam that has had a transformative effect on our relationship and my perspective on life. This experience began on a tranquil spring evening, a time of renewal and flourishing. My nephew Liam and I experienced a profound shift in our relationship and my outlook on life. However, for me, this period felt more like a prolonged period of solitude and yearning. My husband, Carlos, had departed earlier that day, hastily heading to the construction site to conclude a project with a client. His work had recently become exceedingly demanding, with extended hours and demanding days becoming the norm. For the last 3 months, I had grown accustomed to the quiet that filled our home as he frequently left me alone for days at a time, which often prevented us from sharing meaningful moments. That particular evening, the weight of my loneliness did not feel particularly heavy on my shoulders. I was tired, not just physically, but also emotionally drained from the solitude that had. For the past 3 months, I had grown accustomed to the quiet that filled our home as he frequently left me alone for days at a time, which often prevented us from sharing meaningful moments. That particular evening, the weight of my loneliness felt particularly heavy on my shoulders. I was tired, not just physically, but also emotionally drained from the solitude that had begun to feel like a heavy cloak I could not shake off. In an effort to find solace, I decided to retire to bed early, embracing the silence that enveloped the empty house. The tranquility of the night wrapped around me like a warm blanket, providing a comforting sense of peace that I desperately needed. As I lay there, my mind began to wander, and I found myself. I began to feel overwhelmed, and I decided to retire to bed early to find solace. I embraced the silence that enveloped the empty house, and the tranquility of the night wrapped around me like a warm blanket, providing a comforting sense of peace that I desperately needed. As I lay there, my mind began to wander. I found myself slipping into a light slumber. At first, I thought I was dreaming, lost in a haze of peaceful sleep. However, as I slowly opened my eyes, I was startled to find Liam standing in my room. He had a look of unease on his face as he clutched a notebook tightly in his hands. He appeared hesitant, as if he were unsure whether to wake me or simply leave. "Sorry for waking you, Sophie," he said. I was startled to find Liam standing in my room. He had a look of unease on his face, clutching a notebook tightly in his hands. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I need this notebook for a college assignment, and I couldn't find it anywhere else," he said. His unexpected presence surprised me. Liam had always been a polite and considerate young man, and seeing him in my room at such an hour was quite unusual. I quickly sat up in bed, adjusting my nightgown and trying to shake off the remnants of sleep. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I need this book for a college assignment, and I couldn't find it anywhere else." His unexpected presence surprised me. Liam had always been a polite and considerate young man, and seeing him in my room at such an hour was quite unusual. I quickly sat up in bed, adjusting my nightgown and trying to shake off the remnants of sleep. A reassuring smile crossed my lips as I looked at him. "Don't worry, Liam. It's all right. Why don't you sit down for a bit?" I gestured towards a chair beside my bed, inviting him to stay a while. He hesitated, glancing at the chair and then back at me, but ultimately accepted my invitation and settled into the seat. As we began to talk, I could sense the weight of his. I smiled warmly at him, reassuring him that everything would be fine. "Why don't you sit down for a while?" I asked, gesturing towards a chair beside my bed. He hesitated, glancing at the chair and then back at me, but ultimately accepted my invitation and sat down. As we began to talk, I could sense the weight of his academic pressures. He shared with me the challenges he was facing in his final year of college. His voice filled with a mix of determination and frustration as he spoke. I couldn't help but notice how much he had grown and matured since I had last seen him. He was no longer the carefree child I remembered, he had transformed into a thoughtful, intelligent young man. He expressed his desire to talk about his aspirations, which I had always admired. He then admitted that it can be difficult to find someone to talk about these things. Liam's admission of his feelings made me smile, and I responded with an earnest, "I will always be here for you." This interaction made me think about the importance of authenticity. He was sensitive and ambitious, and I admired him. Thank you for listening, Sophie. Sometimes, it's hard to find someone to talk to about these things, he admitted, smiling shyly. His vulnerability touched me, and I responded earnestly. I will always be here for you. In that moment, I was reminded of the importance of genuine connections, something I had longed for in my own life. Our conversation that night filled the void of solitude I had been experiencing, awakening deep feelings within me that I couldn't ignore. Little did I know that night would mark the beginning of something new and unexpected. In the days that followed, Liam became a more frequent presence in my life. We began to talk more often, and our conversations became a welcome interruption to my otherwise monotonous routine. Liam filled the emptiness left by Carlos's long working hours, offering a refuge of understanding and companionship amid my loneliness. We often met in the kitchen or, sometimes, in my bedroom, where we explored a variety of topics, from his college life to where we began to talk more often, and our conversations became a welcome interruption to my otherwise monotonous routine. He provided a sense of understanding and companionship during a period of loneliness. We often met in the kitchen or, on occasion, in my bedroom, where we discussed a variety of topics, including his college life and our shared family memories. One evening, after one of our discussions, the atmosphere shifted. We were engaged in a conversation about his studies and future aspirations when Liam posed a question that caught me off guard. Have you ever thought about pursuing your dreams? Dreams, he asked, his eyes showing curiosity. His question lingered. During one of our discussions, Liam surprised me with a question about my aspirations for the future. I hadn't been asked that in a long time, and it took me a moment to respond. I told him about my forgotten dreams, the ones I had pushed aside. I confessed that my life with Carlos, though comfortable, sometimes felt like a trap, especially with the increasing amount of time he dedicated to his projects, which seemed to draw us further apart instead of bringing us together. Liam listened intently, looking at me with a mix of understanding and compassion. It must be hard, Aunt. I've always seen you as a strong person, but we all need someone to lean on. His words resonated deeply within me. I had grown. Liam spent more and more time working on his projects, and it seemed to create a rift between us. However, he also listened to me intently, looking at me with a mix of understanding and compassion. It must be hard, Aunt. I've always seen you as a strong person, but we all need someone to lean on, he said softly. His words resonated deeply within me. I had grown accustomed to being the pillar that kept everything for everyone else, but in that moment, I realized just how much I needed emotional support myself. With his youthfulness and innate empathy, Liam provided me with a sense of unexpected comfort that I had long been missing in my life. As the night went on, the connection between us flowed naturally. We laughed, shared. I had always been the stabilizing force in my relationships, but that night I realized I, too, needed emotional support. Liam, with his youthfulness and innate empathy, provided me with a sense of unexpected comfort that I had long been missing in my life. As the night went on, the connection between us flowed naturally. We laughed, shared secrets, and created a bond deeper than I could have imagined. At one point, I realized something had shifted. I noticed the way Liam looked at me, the warmth in his smile, and the depth in his eyes. I tried to attribute these feelings to the loneliness and vulnerability of the moment, but it was hard to ignore. There was something in his closeness that stirred long secrets and a deepening bond. I became aware of a shift in the relationship. I observed Liam's gaze, the warmth in his smile, and the depth of his eyes. I tried to attribute these feelings to the loneliness and vulnerability of the moment, but it was difficult to ignore. His proximity stirred forgotten sensations within me. He interrupted my thoughts by suggesting I rest, and before leaving, he assured me he would always be there if I needed him. That night, a mixture of conflicting emotions filled me. I realized I was thinking about him more than I should in the following weeks. Liam became a frequent presence, especially on the nights Carlos worked late. Our meetings, initially marked by light conversations and moral support, began to take on a different depth over time. One particular afternoon, after opening, I experienced a range of emotions regarding the growing distance between Carlos and me. I sent a message to Liam, and he soon arrived in the garden. We conversed about various topics to alleviate my concerns, but something felt different that evening. Liam's gaze was intense, and it sent a shiver down my spine. I was concerned about the growing distance between Carlos and me. I sent a message to Liam, and he arrived at my residence. We conversed about various topics to alleviate my concerns, but something felt different that evening. Liam's gaze was intense, and it caused me to experience a shiver. His expression was not that of a nephew, but rather that of a man. This aroused a sense of vivacity within me that I had not felt in a long time. I attempted to rationalize my feelings as merely a reflection of my loneliness. However, upon further reflection, I realized that something was stirring between us. The man's appearance was not consistent with that of a nephew, but rather with that of a man. This prompted a sense of liveliness that had been absent for some time. I attempted to rationalize these feelings as merely a reflection of my loneliness, but as I continued to reflect, I recognized that a significant connection was emerging between us. At a pivotal moment, Liam leaned down to retrieve a notebook that had fallen from his lap. Our hands briefly touched, creating an electrifying connection that lingered in the air. Our eyes met, and in that instant, I sensed that he had also perceived this connection. "Is everything okay?" he inquired, his voice expressing concern but also conveying something more profound that I could not fully identify. I nodded, taken aback by the intensity of the moment. We sat in silence, the air thick with unspoken words. Liam broke the silence first, his voice dropping to a whisper. "This isn't right." I took a deep breath, my heart racing, as I pulled my hand back. I knew that the feelings we had stirred would not simply vanish. The first real connection between Liam and me happened one night when the tension between us was palpable, reaching a peak that felt almost inevitable. We were engaged in our usual light-hearted conversation. We engaged in a productive dialogue, but there was something distinctly different in the atmosphere. Our conversation took on a more personal and intimate tone, and I sensed that we were crossing an invisible boundary, one that could change everything. If you are still watching this video and find the story inspiring, please leave a comment to let me know you're still with me. As our conversation deepened, Liam leaned in closer to pick up the notebook he had dropped again, and at that moment, our hands connected. This time, it wasn't merely. We had an accidental brush of fingers, which resulted in a shiver down my spine. When our gazes met, I saw a shared desire in his eyes. "I'm uncertain about the nature of our current situation, but I'm unable to ignore the feelings involved," I whispered, my heart pounding as I searched for the right words to express the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. "I don't know either," I replied, earnestly. "We could face this together," I suggested, with a gentle expression and a soft voice. Liam embraced me, offering a gesture of warmth and affection. I held on to him tightly, appreciating the reassuring presence of his body. At that moment, I recognized that the desire I had long suppressed had surfaced. The kiss, initially hesitant, quickly escalated into something more intense. All thoughts of morality and potential were set aside. Liam embraced me, and I returned the gesture. His embrace was warm and affectionate, and I held on to him tightly. I felt his body against mine, and I was aware that I could not turn back. I had suppressed a desire for a long time, and it finally surfaced when our lips met. The kiss began tentatively, hesitant and unsure, but it quickly escalated into something far more intense. All thoughts of morality and potential consequences faded away as we surrendered to the moment. After that first passionate kiss, we fell silent, both of us breathing heavily. We were overwhelmed by the rush of emotions that had been unleashed. This is crazy, I whispered, still feeling the intensity of our contact. I know, but I can't. We were overwhelmed by the intensity of our physical connection, and our subsequent silence was punctuated by our breaths, which were labored and accelerated. Liam's voice, filled with disarming sincerity, resonated with me as he articulated, "This is crazy. I need to be close to you." Without uttering another word, I acquiesced to the fervor of the moment. Embracing him once more, our kisses grew more intense and passionate, each one igniting a fire that had been smoldering. "I need to be close to you," he said, his voice expressing a deep sincerity that resonated with me. Without saying more, I surrendered to the intensity of the moment, embracing him fully. Our kisses became more passionate, igniting a fire that had been dormant for a long time. The room felt charged with an energy that enveloped us, and before we knew it, we found ourselves in bed. Our bodies moved in a dance of passion and surrender. The intimacy we shared that night transcended the physical. It forged a profound connection, as if our souls were finally, after a prolonged period of dormancy, the situation became active once more. The atmosphere was charged with a palpable energy, and before we recognized it, we found ourselves in bed. Our bodies engaged in a physical interaction that transcended the mere act of physical intimacy. It forged a profound connection, as if our souls were finally able to communicate in a way they had long been yearning for. As we drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, I felt a peace that had eluded me for so long. However, deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that this stolen happiness came at a cost. In the weeks that followed, we became enmeshed in a whirlwind of emotions. We found ourselves drawn to each other, and our encounters became increasingly. We were careful to maintain a balance between secrecy and desire, and we did our utmost to ensure that no trace of our meetings was left behind. This added to the thrill of our forbidden passion. Each new encounter was filled with a mix of love and the constant anxiety of being discovered. We were careful to keep our meetings secret, but this only added to the excitement of our hidden relationship. Each new meeting was filled with a mix of love and the constant anxiety of being discovered. However, we found ourselves drawn to each other night after night. One evening, as we lay together discussing the meaning of everything that had transpired between us, a palpable tension filled the air, one of worry and emotion. "Nina, I don't know how much longer we can keep this up," Liam said, his voice heavy with unease. We must be cautious. We should find a way to be together without risking everything." His serious gaze suggested a different approach. I felt a flicker of hope. We reached a mutual agreement to keep our relationship discreet, taking all necessary precautions to avoid detection. Yet the intensity of our feelings for one another only continued to grow. Each encounter transformed into a blend of fleeting love and the ever-present fear of the forbidden. I expressed my deepest feelings. "I can no longer be without you, Liam. It feels too late to turn back now." Liam, he proposed that we continue to meet in secret, but with extreme caution, as our financial resources are limited and we cannot afford to make mistakes. I nodded in agreement, recognizing that this was our only viable option for the time being. Consequently, we finalized our plans, deciding to maintain our relationship's secrecy, fully aware of the potential risks, but determined. He proposed that we continue to meet in secret, exercising extreme caution. I acknowledged the gravity of the situation, recognizing that this was our only viable option for the time being. We concluded our meeting, deciding to maintain our relationship's clandestine nature, fully aware of the potential consequences but resolute in our commitment to each other. On one occasion, while we were in my room, we heard a disturbance in the living room. In a moment of alarm, I drew Liam into the closet. He appeared pale and trembling, and I felt a surge of guilt. "This is too risky," I whispered, his voice also trembling. He concurred. We had been inseparable, but I felt uneasy. I had a premonition that something was wrong. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't. One night, we were in my room when I heard a noise from the living room. I immediately pulled Liam into the closet. He was pale and trembling. I felt guilty. This was too risky. I whispered, "We need to be more careful." he agreed. We had been lucky that time, but we couldn't rely on it forever. We needed to be smarter and more discreet. I noticed that he wasn't entirely convinced that our suspicions had been cleared. I knew it would be hard to fully escape them. 2 weeks after the incident, Liam was preoccupied with his final exams in his final year of college. Meanwhile, I began to feel unwell, experiencing nausea for several weeks. I was aware that something was wrong, and the emotional impact of the situation was significant. I attempted to ignore it and not dwell on it too much. One day, when Carlos returned from completing a project he had been working on, he suggested we take a trip to celebrate. I agreed, but mentioned that I was feeling a bit sick and needed to go to the hospital. Worried, Carlos called a doctor to come to our house. Hours later, after the tests, the doctor confirmed with a. Carlos returned from a project one day and suggested that we take a trip to celebrate. I agreed, but I mentioned that I felt a bit sick and needed to go to the hospital. Worried, Carlos called a doctor to come to our house. After the tests, the doctor confirmed that I was 2 months pregnant. Carlos was taken aback. His face showed a mix of surprise and confusion as he processed my words. How could this happen? He asked, incredulous. A hint of desperation crept into his tone. It had been quite some time since we had shared any intimate moments, and he seemed unable to reconcile. Carlos was taken aback by the revelation of our relationship and the implications it entailed. I felt a wave of guilt wash over me, tightening my chest as I nodded in agreement to his question. I felt the weight of my choices pressing down on me. We had been discussing a trip to reignite the spark between us, and I had reluctantly agreed. I had been grappling with the reality of our relationship and the implications it might have on our future. I had agreed to go on a trip with him, hoping it might help us clarify our situation. However, once we returned home, I understood that I needed to face the truth. I prepared to explain the situation in full, my heart racing with the anticipation of what was to come. I recounted every detail, laying bare my heart and the complex emotions I was experiencing. I was prepared to explain the situation in full, and I was ready to face the consequences of my actions. However, Carlos's reaction was disappointing. He stood up abruptly, and his eyes conveyed a deep sense of disappointment as he packed his bags in silence. This gesture felt final, and it left me feeling devastated and alone. I felt a sense of guilt wash over me. Grappling with Carlos left me feeling overwhelmed. I was devastated by the knowledge of what I had lost and the reality of my choices. I was also haunted by the feeling of guilt. I had lost contact with Liam, and I was unsure of how to move forward. Mistakes I had made. I lacked the courage to confess the truth. I wanted Liam to continue his internship at the university without the burden of my complications. Now, I stood at a crossroads, overwhelmed by intense and conflicting emotions. The weight of my decisions pressed heavily on my chest as I lay awake at night. I had made mistakes, and I lacked the courage to confess the truth. I wanted Liam to continue his internship at the university without the burden of my complications. Now, I stood at a crossroads, overwhelmed by intense and conflicting emotions. The weight of my decisions pressed heavily on my chest as I lay awake at night, wrestling with the reality I had created. I felt a sharp pang of guilt towards Carlos, who had once been a loving husband. Yet, there was also the warmth of the connection I had found with Liam, a bond that had transformed my existence. Days turned into a blur as I navigated this emotional landscape. Liam continued. I was forced to confront the reality that I had created. I felt a sharp pang of guilt towards Carlos, who had once been a loving husband. However, I also felt the warmth of the connection I had found with Liam, a bond that had transformed my existence. Days turned into a blur as I navigated this emotional landscape. Liam continued to reach out, his intuition telling him that something was amiss. I did my best to put on a brave face, but inside, I was crumbling under the pressure of my secrets. I was overcome with the urge to confide in him, to share the burden of my turmoil. But fear held me back. I was terrified of how he would react. I attempted to maintain a professional demeanor, but internally, I was overwhelmed by the weight of my secret. I felt compelled to share my concerns with Liam, but I was hesitant to do so due to my fear of losing him. One pleasant afternoon, while we were sitting in the garden where we had shared many intimate moments, Liam approached me. "Maya, you've been distant lately. Is something going on?" he asked. "You can tell me anything," he said, his voice expressing concern. I felt my heart race as I hesitated. Rewind to a recent afternoon in the garden, where we had shared intimate moments. That day, Liam asked, "Maya, you've been distant lately. Is something going on? You can tell me anything." His voice expressed concern. I felt my heart race as I hesitated, the weight of my secret crashing over me like a tidal wave. "It's complicated, Liam. I've just been feeling overwhelmed," I managed to reply, averting his gaze. "I care about you, right? Whatever it is, we can face it together," he said. His words felt like I was overwhelmed by the weight of my secret, and I felt like I was drowning in the consequences of my own choices. I looked into Liam's eyes and saw the trust and love he had for me, and it made my heart ache. I knew I had to make a decision, either confess and risk everything or continue lying and potentially lose him forever. The truth felt like poison. I was overwhelmed by the situation. I realized that I couldn't carry this burden alone. "I need to tell you something," I finally said. My voice trembled as I spoke. Liam leaned in closer, his expression shifting to one of unwavering support, ready to catch me if I fell. I said, "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air. I realized that I could no longer carry this burden alone. "I need to tell you something," I finally said. My voice trembled as I spoke. Liam leaned in closer, his expression shifting to one of unwavering support, ready to catch me if I fell. "I'm pregnant." The words hung heavily in the air between us, thick with unspoken fears and uncertainties. His eyes widened in shock. "Pregnant," he said. "But how?" I thought. I interrupted, tears welling in my eyes as I spoke. "It's with Carlos. I don't know how it happened. I didn't mean for any of this to occur. Liam, I care about you so much, and now I don't." There is a palpable tension in the air between us, accompanied by a sense of uncertainty and unease. His eyes widened in shock. "I am pregnant," I thought, "but I am not sure." Tears welled in my eyes as I spoke. "I am with Carlos. I don't know how it happened. I didn't intend for this to occur. Liam, I care about you so much, and now I don't." A silent tension hung in the air between us. Liam's face showed a storm of emotions, surprise, confusion, and pain. He finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper and laced with vulnerability. "What about us? What does this mean for us?" "I don't know," I replied. I admitted, my heart breaking at the thought of losing him. "I wish things were different. I wish I could turn back time and make different choices." The enormity of my predicament settled in, and I felt the tears spill down my cheeks. He reached for my hand, his touch igniting a spark of hope in the depths of my despair. "We can," he said. I admitted my heart was breaking at the thought of losing him. "I wish things were different. I wish I could turn back time and make different choices." I realized the gravity of my situation. Tears spilled down my cheeks. He reached for my hand, and I felt a spark of hope in the depths of my despair. "We can figure this out together. Maya, you're not alone in this." His sincerity washed over me like a wave, and I realized that despite the chaos of my situation, I still had Liam, someone who genuinely cared for me and was willing to stand by my side, no matter how complicated things became. If you're still tuned in, video and share your thoughts in the comments. I am still here, but the road ahead feels uncertain. I'm confronted with the reality of my decisions and their potential outcomes. There's a lot of uncertainty, but I'm certain of one thing: I can't let go of the love I had discovered with Liam. We sat in silence for a moment, both lost in our thoughts, before Liam spoke again. "Whatever you decide, I'll be here," he said. "But we need to think carefully about the future, about what this means for us and your baby." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle. The love we shared was undeniable, but I also had a responsibility to the life growing inside me. I struggled with the competing demands of duty and desire, and I knew I had to find a way to reconcile both. With a newfound determination, I took a deep, steadying breath, trying to anchor myself amidst the swirling emotions that had consumed me for so long. "Let's figure this out together. This is our journey, Liam. Regardless of the circumstances, I value your presence." As I expressed these sentiments, I observed a radiant expression, a mix of relief and anticipation, crossing his face. This illuminated the uncertainties that had enveloped us for the past few weeks. I experienced a profound sense of clarity, a much-needed beacon illuminating my path through the haze of Liam and I had a deep and abiding connection, and I knew that no matter what challenges we faced, I could count on him. His face brightened as he looked at me, and I could see a sense of relief and hope in his eyes. I felt a clear sense of direction, as if we were being guided by a beacon through the fog of confusion and doubt. We were both aware of the gravity of our situation, but at that moment, we had a shared understanding that forged an unbreakable bond between us. We recognized that the journey ahead would be tumultuous, filled with obstacles and potential heartache. However, there was an undeniable strength in our connection, and we were determined to navigate it together. We were aware that the road ahead would be difficult, and we were prepared to face challenges, including emotional difficulties, as we worked together to find solutions. Our commitment to each other was based on a strong foundation of love and respect. This bond was now stronger because we had created a new life together. When I looked into Liam's eyes, I could see my own fears and hopes reflected there. Together, we faced an uncertain future, but with Liam's support, I felt we could overcome any obstacle. We were committed to each other and to creating a better life for our child. This was not just about us anymore, it was about the life that was beginning to grow within me, a life that would require nurturing and care, just like our burgeoning relationship. As we stood at the crossroads, I realized that we had the power to shape our destinies, to redefine. Our bond was more than just a connection, it was a commitment to each other and to the life growing inside me. We understood that we would need to support each other through the challenges ahead. I was reminded of the strength that comes from vulnerability and how sharing our fears and hopes could strengthen our bond. Liam reached for my hand, and in that simple gesture, I felt a wave of warmth and reassurance wash over me. The act felt almost sacred, as if we were sealing a promise to face whatever came our way together and figure it out. "Maya, no matter how difficult it gets, I'm here for you," he said, his voice steady and sincere. I could feel the weight of his commitment surrounding me, a protective shield against the uncertainty that loomed ahead with each step. The act felt almost sacred, as if we were making a vow to face any challenges that arose, together. "We will overcome any difficulties, Maya. I'm here for you," he said, his voice steady and sincere. I could sense the weight of his commitment, a protective shield against the uncertainty that lay ahead. As time passed, our determination strengthened. We conversed late into the night about our aspirations and concerns, outlining potential future outcomes. We discussed methods to communicate the truth to Carlos, recognizing the importance of honesty, no matter how challenging it might be. We addressed the realities of parenthood and the responsibilities that lay ahead, acknowledging as the moment passed, our determination strengthened. We conversed late into the night about our aspirations and concerns, outlining potential future outcomes. We discussed methods to communicate the truth to Carlos, recognizing the importance of honesty, regardless of the discomfort it might cause. We addressed the substantial responsibilities of parenthood, acknowledging the gravity of the situation without evading the emotions it elicited. I conveyed my concerns regarding the potential changes to our relationship and how it might be perceived by others. Liam listened attentively, his expression conveying a blend of empathy and resolve. He assured me that our primary concern should be our feelings for each other. We discussed the possibility of creating something together. I expressed my concerns about the potential changes to our relationship and how it might be perceived by others. Liam listened attentively, conveying a blend of empathy and resolve. He assured me that our own family and narrative, irrespective of external perceptions, was of paramount importance. His words resonated profoundly, igniting a surge of courage within me. I recognized that, while the future was uncertain, it was also an uncharted canvas, one we could together fill with our dreams and aspirations. We envisioned a life filled with laughter, love, and the possibility of new beginnings. We agreed that we would face our challenges together, and this made me feel empowered. I realized that I was not alone, and I had Liam's support. The fear that had previously immobilized me began to dissipate, and I felt a renewed sense of hope. Together, we would face the challenges that lay ahead, committed to navigating the complexities of our lives with honesty and compassion. With Liam by my side, I felt emboldened and ready to confront the reality of my choices, knowing that the fear that had previously immobilized me began to dissipate, and a renewed sense of hope emerged. We would face the challenges that lay ahead, committed to navigating the complexities of our lives with honesty and compassion. With Liam by my side, I felt emboldened and ready to confront the reality of my choices, knowing that our love had the power to transform even the most daunting circumstances into opportunities for growth and connection. And so, hand in hand, we took our first steps forward, ready to embrace whatever the future held, determined to carve out a path that honored both our love and a new life we had created together. We reflected on the journey of Maya and Liam. Their story highlights the intricacies of love decisions and the emotional bonds that bind us. It invites us to consider the significance of honesty in our relationships and the courage it takes to face the consequences of our decisions. What have you learned from Maya and Liam's experience? We welcome your insights in the comments section below. What have you learned from Maya and Liam's experience that you plan to bring into your own life? If you like this video, please leave your comment below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content that dives deep into the intricacies of human emotions and relationships. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.